you see why I chose Dr. Shaw to give that presentation. These are my financial disclosures, and just want to say, for all this talk about innovation, I'm not sure I've ever had an original idea. You've seen publications, short tag news, superior rectus transposition, but these were all other people's ideas that I latched onto. I maybe enhanced, I studied them, I published, and I promoted and disseminated the concept to try to move the field forward. Now, if you want to talk about an innovator, we can talk about, so these were not my ideas, we can talk about Frank Costenbader. Costenbader was, he actually, you may not know, he had two patents to his name. One was a accommodometer for measuring accommodation in children and adults. He also patented the Costenbader children's eye frame to enhance the experience of refining refraction in kids. He was also an innovator as a surgeon. Costenbader was one of the first to advocate early and symmetric surgery for infantile esotropia. He also reduced the length of stay for children from 3 days down to 1 day, reduced the amount of bandaging, and he was an advocate of orthoptists. He was an inaugural or founding member of the American Orthoptic Council, and he advocated for his kids as well as a co-founder of Blue Shield of Washington, D.C. But Costenbader's greatest innovation was his decision after 13 years as an ophthalmologist to devote his practice to pediatrics. Now, this was not without pushback. He was told by friends and family that you're not going to be able to support your family if you're only seeing kids. He was told by his colleagues, you're going to steal all the pediatric patients away from us. It's not a good idea. But despite those recommendations, he persisted, and thanks to his persistence, we're here together to celebrate our own passion as pediatric ophthalmologists in this specialty. Now, what I want to share today with you is a story of one innovation and take you on this treacherous path from inspiration to commercialization. And along the way, as we go through this, I'm hoping to change, maybe modify how you think about vision screening, but also for those of you who have ideas to kind of help you picture yourself and how you're going to bring those ideas out into the world. So my story starts at ARVO in 1990. This was on the beachside in Sarasota, 2 months before I was due to start my fellowship with Dave Guyton and Mike Repka. That's me standing next to Dave Guyton. And I said to Dave, so do you have any good ideas for what I might work on, a fellowship research project? And he said, yeah, I was thinking, wouldn't it be neat if you could remotely detect fixation of the eye by scanning the eye with polarized light? And I said, yeah, I like that. I latched on. And so the concept here, just to give a little bit more background to that, is we're not talking about scanning the nerve fibers. We're talking about scanning the Henle fibers, which are the cone axons that emanate from the fovea on their way to their first synapse. These form a rich network of fibers that have birefringence, which is the property that changes the state of polarized light as the light passes through it. And it's such that if you take a picture of the retina through crossed polarizers, then you'll see this birefringent pattern that marks the fovea and tells you where the fovea is. It's a brush pattern. The Heidinger brush is the analog when you're looking from the inside out. So that was the basic concept. 2 months later, I was starting my fellowship at Wilmer. We were down in the Wilmer basement. I didn't see any optical lab. The optical lab was actually a coffee table. It was behind Dave's desk. It was about 2 feet off the ground behind his chair in his office. And but he had some polarizer. We got some polarizers, and I'd actually have to come in after hours. I'd grab one of those little kiddie chairs from the waiting room and sit down behind him at his big desk, hooking up resistors and polarizers and trying to build an apparatus, and sort of begin to get things going. Dave somehow acquired lab space just down the hall from the Wilmer basement. It was pretty good lab space, although we had to come in one night with his guidance and tear down a wall in the room to make it the right space. He got in trouble for that. I didn't. But there was no computer. We didn't have a computer. Those are hard to come by. But there was a researcher two doors down, and he said I could use his computer. So after hours, so I'd come in on nights and weekends, and I'd run this wire from the computer down two offices down the hall to my apparatus, which is now on a table. And then I'd go to the computer. I'd hit the button. Then I'd run down the hall, and I'd put my chin in the chin rest, and look around a couple times, and I run back to the office, I hit the button, and look at the data. But what I saw in the data was, as my eye moved around, the signal changed. And so that told me that there was something going on, that we maybe had something to work on. And so by then I was halfway through fellowship, was able to get some additional money, some grant support, including Children's Eye Foundation, to keep things going. There were a lot of no's, but there were a few yeses. And then I was able to recruit biomedical engineering master's students. Saurabh Patel was the first, and he put together this scanner that Dave designed to, instead of having to move the eye around, it scanned a little circle around the eye. And we call that originally retinal birefringence scanner, now retinal polarization scanner. And what we saw was that when you looked at away from the center, the signal, polarization signal coming back was equal to the scanning frequency of the mirror. But when you looked at the center, the frequency doubled. And so now we had a signature, a remote signature of foveal fixation, twice the scanning frequency coming back. Just to kind of explain how that works is that as you're going around that brush pattern, you go high, low, twice for one scan around. That gives you twice the scanning frequency back, whereas if you're off center, you go high, just one time. That just says that there's an eye there, but it's not centrally fixated. So we patented that idea. It took several years to get the patent. Meanwhile, I couldn't publish anything on it, so I had to do other research to kind of keep things going and continue to work on the project. Here's Dr. Shah, who just introduced me with that's with the first monocular scanning device, which took up a whole table. The Soma Sao and one of the who's also there, and some of the other students worked with me and Dave to shrink it down to handheld size, because our goal was eventually to be able to use it in handheld design. Encore's job was to put two of them together into one box so we could do binocular scanning. And the reason we wanted to scan both eyes simultaneously is because now you can detect strabismus. So by regularly scanning the eye, multiple sequences over a short period of time, if both eyes are fixating, you get a binocularity score, which would be 100% for a patient with straight eyes, perfectly aligned eyes, but 0% for a patient who had strabismus. So this binocularity score was a way to judge whether the two eyes were fixating simultaneously. And this was the first version of that device that Dr. Shah successfully built, and it worked. We tested a number of subjects and could detect strabismus. Then it stopped working. We couldn't actually we found a design flaw. We changed the design. That one didn't work either after another year or so. But then we again redesigned it and got one that was working, and here's the 2001 version. Now, because the goal was to be using a vision screening, We knew we thought we could detect strabismus, but we wanted to be able to detect anisometropy, so Dave Guyton came up with a mechanism by which we could also do focus detection at the same time. So this had focus detection in it, and because we're going to be scanning moving kids, he put in a laser pointer, two laser pointer rangefinder, so that you know that the child's eyes are in the path of the device. So then, moving forward, we came up with when I was in Boston, we further refined the design to get it in a fully handheld mode with all the circuitry on board, and we called that the pediatric vision scanner. So with these various devices, we collected data over time, and as you would expect, normal controls had 90% or greater binocularity scores, as did anyone who had risk factors, amblyopia risk factors, but who didn't have amblyopia or strabismus. They had high binocularity scores. Also, as we expected, what we're happy to see, the strabismus patients had low binocularity scores. The more constant strabismus, the lower the score. But what we didn't expect was that the straight-eyed, no shift on cover testing, anisometropic amblyopes also had low binocularity scores. So now we realized that we had something extra special. We didn't need focus detection. We were detecting all kinds of amblyopia. How could that be? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is we know this is a scanning laser ophthalmoscope image showing eccentric fixation of an amblyopic eye on the bottom. So we have eccentric fixation in amblyopic eyes, even if they're straight eyes on cover testing. You also have fixation instability. This is a normal saccadic movements from one of Eileen Birch's study. This is a patient this is an amblyopic eye. So the amblyopic eyes have fixation stability and eccentric fixation, and this is what picks up this is why we're detecting anisometropic amblyopia. Now, just to be sure that this was real, we retested a number of subjects who had successful amblyopia treatment, and you see that these patients who started off with low binocularity scores, once their vision recovered and their stereopsis came back, their binocularity scores went up to 100%, whereas if the amblyopia didn't get better, neither did the binocularity score. So this was so unexpected that measuring strabismus could detect amblyopia that we were able to patent this concept as the second brick of intellectual property in developing this device. So now we felt like we had enough to start a company and to bring this out into the world, but we had to get it through FDA. Now, thanks to Eileen Birch at Retina Foundation Southwest, Sean Donahue at Vanderbilt, Sue Cotter at USC, we were able to accumulate enough data to be able to put together an FDA submission. But before we could submit it, we're like, well, you got to get through safety testing first. And it was just me and Justin Shaka, our CEO. We were doing this on our own. We didn't know. So, but the first step in safety testing is, you'd think it was laser safety, right? No, you got to pass a drop test. It's a handheld device. You've got to be able to drop it from 3 feet off the ground and not have it turn into a dangerous weapon or electrocute somebody. And we're like, really? So here we are at the testing lab. Now, each of these devices, it's probably $50,000 in each of these devices, and we only have 5 of them for our clinical trials, but we got to drop it. And we have no idea if it's going to shatter into 1 million pieces or if it's going to survive the drop. So this was news. We couldn't exactly try it out in the office before we took it in. So it was all news to us. Let's see what happened. You'll see he wants us to fail by the way he talks. Oh. Okay, didn't shatter.
Well, that was just paint.
But wait a minute, hold your applause.
But that right there is a failure because you can definitely take this off and get a finger probe in there.
So you said that was a failure? So that night, Justin and I took that device, we had it in the shopping cart at Home Depot, and we're looking for a bracket that's going to fit, like, so that that front piece wouldn't bend, wouldn't drop back the next time it got dropped. So the next day we're back, oh, you also have to pass a flammability test. If we hold a flame to it for 2 seconds, it can't keep burning, or you'll fail that. So, all right, let's see what happened.
2, 1, stop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No.
It just gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
Coding might have helped it,
Because
but
you can see how it's like it's shooting out jets.
yeah, yeah, right.
It's done.
Yeah, they were really sad for us. So we had to go find a new plastic. We had to figure out that. We actually eventually got through all the safety testing. We submit to FDA, and then they said, oh, by the way, you've got to do reproducibility testing. So, well, what's that? Well, you've got to study this. You need 3 people to study the same child 3 times in a row, 3 or 4 times in a row, and we want to be sure that all 12 of those tests you get the same result. And we're like, but these are like kids, and it's a smiley face. They're going to look at it. They said, no, we want you to do that. So we asked for a meeting. So we had a meeting, but to get ready for the meeting with a lot of materials, we've made a video to show what it's like if you try to scan a child 10 times in a row. So this is the video that we made, and so here's the first, this is the first test, and then we'll proceed on.
Look at the smiley face.
Breathe.
Right, look into the smiley face. Great, thank you.
Perfect score.
Too far back. Okay. Wait, can you open your eyes and make sure it's smiley face? Okay.
You know that song? Can you sit up?
So we thought we had a pretty good case, so we, a couple days later we get a letter back, no, we want you to do repeat testing. Yeah, right, so we'd already been through like $100 an hour FDA consultant and a $250 an hour FDA consultant, so we got a $500 an hour FDA consultant, and he went head to head with them, and he got them to agree to let us do repeat testing in adults, so we got through it. So eventually we were through FDA testing. So now we really haven't had a chance to talk about like trying to do all this and commercialize this because there are a lot of questions that you might have, like what about intellectual property? How do you build a prototype? What about incorporating a company? What about raising money from investors or getting SBIR grants? So we actually had Jim Ellis, Farouk Org, and I put together a workshop, an APOS workshop for APOS members who are interested. Now, well, that was rejected this year, but we're hoping that maybe next year we'll be able to do that and spend the time on it. But in the meantime, we put all that together, have a company, engineers, designers, to build a commercial device, a manufacturable device, and this is what we have come up with. And it's the same basic principles that you've seen in the initial design. So we get a background signal off the chest. Now we come with the laser pointer dots right in between the eyes there, and in 2.5 seconds we have an answer. And I'll show you data that says that when you see that pass, you know that there's more than a 96% chance that that child has neither amblyopia nor strabismus nor any referral warranted condition. Now what I mean by referral warranted condition is that this is a little bit more, because this is so precise at being able to detect alignment, it's different, so we needed to refine criteria. So true positive is what you'd expect. Patient tests positive, they have amblyopia or strabismus. But what about if a child has optic nerve hypoplasia and they get referred? That's a false positive. So we created another category, what we call acceptable positive, which would be considered an appropriate referral because of some other eye condition that would warrant being seen by a pediatric ophthalmologist. True negative, say there's another issue there too, because sure, true negative, no amblyopia or strabismus, negative test, fine. But what about a child who has intermittent exotropia, well-controlled, high-grade stereopsis, no amblyopia? That's going to be a false negative because they have strabismus. So we call that an acceptable negative, intermittent strabismus controlled with no amblyopia or stereo, because those patients can be monitored without risk of losing vision for their life. And then when we enroll subjects, as you see, we can't enroll patients who've had treatment because they could revert back to being normal. So with all of this, we've done many studies over the years, 5 studies, 3 devices, more than 1,000 subjects over a decade. And in all of these studies, sensitivity has always been 96% or higher. Specificity has ranged from 87 to 96% for referral-warranted conditions as I defined in the previous slide. That middle one was a Bob Arnold study that I reanalyzed, and I know that he has a study here that may show not as good results, but we need to find out. There may be some issue with his device, I'm not sure. So I think we're getting some headway in getting people to think about vision screening as what we're looking for is, I think, amblyopia and strabismus. Risk factors were great when we needed a proxy for amblyopia and strabismus, because patients with risk factors might have it, but now we have a tool that says that we have a tool that detects it when it's present. So why do we need to look at risk factors? If we're looking for amblyopia and strabismus, why look at risk factors when we can now detect the condition? So the thing is, though, that we need more money, though, to bring this out into the world. So we've talked to a lot of investors over time. Fortunately, we found a lot of private investors who've been willing to take a risk and put money in. When I have gone to talk to venture capitalists, it generally hasn't gone well. They're nice to us, and then they ghost us. But one of them was kind enough to give us some feedback. And he said, look, in the medical world, therapeutics, that's where I'm going to get my big return. That's number 1. Number 2 is diagnostics. What you've got is screening. And you're trying to sell the device to pediatricians. It's like, why should I put money in your company when I know the next Viagra is out there? So we thought, well, maybe we can use this technology to come up with another device that has more potential that would excite investors. So I was talking to a colleague, Lee Goldstein, who studies traumatic brain injury. And we know that traumatic brain injury is a public health problem. We know that more than half the brain circuits support visual function. And there's good evidence that patients who've had traumatic brain injury will have, they have fixation instability. We can check that. They have convergence insufficiency. We're a near device. We can detect that. They also have abnormal saccadic latency. Well, our device doesn't look at saccadic latency. It's just a yes or no fixation. So we modified the device to try to assess saccadic latency by adding lights to the periphery of the device. So it still has the smiley face in the center, but now there are little lights to the side, and so I'm going to run you through a test now. So just look at the smiley and then follow the green lights, and you'll feel there's a little latency as your eyes go from one point to another. You don't know where the next one's going to come. And we can tell what's the departure latency and what's the returning latency for getting back to the center. So using that, we did some clinical studies, first at UPenn. And this is the latest version of this of the TBI device. And this is what we get from a control. Now this is a 40-second, it's not a 2.5-second study, it's 40 seconds here. At the right eye, left eye, you can see that when the eye is supposed to be on the target, it is. You see when it's supposed to leave the target, it's gone over and over again, over a number of times. You can't see saccadic latency on this because of the resolution of this. Here's one of the subjects who had a traumatic brain injury. And I don't think you need a lot of training to see that there's a problem with that person. So this is where we stand today. So far, it's been a pretty fun ride. It's, I don't know if you'd call it a roller coaster ride, or a haunted house ride, or maybe an escape room. But all in all, not a bad first year fellowship project I'm still working on. But it just might, help us eliminate the #1 cause of vision loss in children, amblyopia. So I have a lot of people to thank for this, all these efforts over many years. The grant support, the investors, the donations, and then I tried to put together a thank you slide of all the people that have helped, but it would have looked like a phone book. You know, there's just hundreds and hundreds of people who have been involved in this over the years. But I do want to thank my family, my wife Connie. Also have to thank I want to thank my ex-wife Shelley, who was in it for the years. Mother of my 2 boys, Adam and Luke. Luke is able to be here. And I want to thank the APOS Award Committee or Program Committee for giving me this opportunity to recognize and celebrate the legacy and innovation of Frank Costenbader. Thank you.
Wow, that was great. On behalf of the CEF of APOS, I am honored to present this Costenbader Lecture Certificate to David Hunter. What an outstanding lecture in every way.
Thank you.
You know, I sometimes hear, gosh, there's nothing new in pediatric ophthalmology. We just do old twists on things. Well, this is new and exciting science, and it will benefit many patients from all over the world for years to come. Congratulations on great work and a great presentation and sharing your ride with us, David.